Welcome to American Players Theater Talkbacks to Go. I'm Buzz Kemper, and I invite you to take a walk up the hill with Orange Schroeder and me as Orange chats with director James Bohnen about APT's production of Private Lives by Noël Coward.
Hi, we're here discussing the wonderful Noël Coward comedy Private Lives with director James Bohnen, and I thank you for coming here today to talk to us. One of the things that people find fascinating about Private Lives is that it was apparently written very quickly. Noël Coward was convalescing in Shanghai and had 2 weeks to think about things, and then, at least according to rumor, he wrote this play in just 4 days. Do you think that's true?
I think it could be, because when he got an idea, actually Private Lives is in a way an exception in that frequently he would just start writing instantly. But in this case, he, feeling himself a little more mature, and I think he felt pretty certain about the idea. The idea had come to him about a month earlier. As he describes in his wonderful autobiography, he spent 4 hours just sort of laying out the play because he had an idea for himself and for his dear friend Gertrude Lawrence to play these two parts that have gone on to become extremely famous roles that most comic actors of a certain age, are desperate to play. But he intentionally did not write the play right away because he wanted it to kind of germinate. And then, yes, he was ill with the flu in Shanghai on a long Eastern trip. And he, over the course of 4 days, he says, he wrote what is, in essence, the play we know now.
You mentioned about the roles being famous, and of course, Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton are among the actors who have played them.
I actually saw them play it.
Did you see that? Well, tell us about that.
Well, it was at a time of their lives, and I think both personally and professionally, where I don't think either of them were at the top of their game. So it was more of a spectacle than real. I felt like the play got lost a little, maybe. But it was absolutely fascinating to watch.
and tell us about APT's choice of actors to play these roles.
Well, they're actually, Jim DeVita is going to play the male role, and Deborah Staples will play the female, the parts of Elliot and Amanda, who, most people know this, but they were married at one point, had a rather volatile relationship, divorced, and now 5 years later they've each married someone else, and improbably enough have chosen to take their honeymoons at the same hotel in Deauville on the coast of France. And even more improbably, which is, of course, what makes it so comedic, their suites are adjoining with terraces that conjoin. So they end up running into each other on the terraces of their apartments, shall we say, on the nights of their wedding. It's actually literally their wedding nights to other people.
So there is a bit of a conceit that we have to accept.
Oh, I think so. I actually am going to tell the actors the first day a story of a woman that I know who basically did what happens in the play. So, I mean, it does happen occasionally.
Did what happened in the play, including the trading of...
Well, she didn't go back to an old husband, but she met a man 3 weeks before. She'd been engaged for 7 years, and she met a man 3 weeks before she was to be married, and they both agreed that they were just made for each other, but there was nothing to be done about it. And then the man turned up at the wedding. And so she told her long-suffering, now husband of 6 hours, that she was going to annul the marriage and marry somebody else, and she did. So I just point that out to say that people do crazy, impulsive things, and so.
And if you have 4 days, could you make that into a play, James?
Alas, no.
It would make a good one, I think.
It probably would, but I'm afraid she might take offense to my borrowing her story. So.
And Noël Coward wrote a song for this play. Someday I'll Find You. Are we using music in the APT version?
Yes, there's some wonderful use of music, and it's there's a lot of different ways you could use it. There's a number of versions of the text, excuse me, that, and I think we're going to choose to have Deb sing it just a little bit in the first act to kind of plant the seed of the song, and then in the second act there'll be and I'm using this word in quotation marks for those of you who are listening, a duet in the second act, but it probably won't be a conventional duet. Coward, and both Coward and Gertrude Lawrence were famously sort of entertainers as well as actors, and they're both quite good singers. And Coward in particular, he wrote many, 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 many famous songs. But since that's a situation that we don't necessarily have in this case, and I think it's frankly a good, I mean, the trade-off we're making for Jimmy's magnificent acting is that he's not a fan of singing, so I'm torturing him a little to make him think he's going to sing, but probably he won't.
And speaking of the second act, that was rather controversial when the play was written, wasn't it? There was a fear of censorship.
Yeah, it's a fairly well. What happens is very blunt, and some of it is sexual, not in any overt way that people are used to now. But in 1930, it was pretty risque. Well, plus just the behavior itself was risque. Yeah, I mean, these are not the most likable people in the world. They're two of the funniest people that you'll ever meet, but they are ferociously selfish. I mean, just sort of astonishingly selfish. And so I think one of the things that makes the play so magnificent is the kind of high wire act that Coward is walking, trying to hang on to the audience's affection for these two people when they're really doing basically hideous things to other people. and these other people, for the majority of the play, seem quite normal and nice. So it's, I'd say I love that. As a director and as actors, that's a hugely fun challenge to see how far you can push that. Because you can't really apologize for what they're doing. I mean, if you tried to make them nicer people, I mean, you just say, like, that'd be like making Lady Macbeth and Macbeth, charming people that live next door to you. I mean, the play would just sink like a stone. So.
And we don't have to worry so much about the censorship, but I understand that at the time that he was trying to get it put on stage, Noël Coward himself acted it out at St. James Palace in order to...
Right. Well, the censorship was very, very strong then. And if the Lord, whatever, I forget what his name was, but if he decided you weren't going to put the play on, there was no going back.
And what year are we talking?
1930.
1930 in England.
Yeah, in England, yeah.
And what can you tell us about Coward? I know that you always are a careful researcher of what you work with.
Well, see, I think he was at the height of his powers in 1930. He was, but I think what's fascinating about this particular play, and one of the reasons that it's so durable, is that I think he like many people, was very strongly affected by what was happening in the world at the time and how much England and Europe had changed due to World War I and how the class system had sort of collapsed. And but I remember he was basically writing the play right after the stock market collapsed all over the world. So because his investor had made careful investments, he hadn't lost a whole lot of money. But many, many people that he knew had lost all their savings. And I think underneath this play is that kind of desperation and fear that, the world that you always expected was going to be the same suddenly isn't. And of course, then there's this looming, I think he was very, as he would say, patriotic. And he got very involved during World War II and rode on destroyers and wrote a famous movie about destroyers and acted in it. But, so I think even in 1930, people knew that the armistice of World War I had not solved anything. And so there was this looming other thing that might be out there, which of course 10 years later was the horror of World War II. So, you find these people doing these selfish, intensely personal things in 1930, right, halfway through, but you sort of, one way you can excuse them is because their worlds have changed and they're afraid. They're afraid that so much is going to change, and so you just want to grab for any kind of pleasure, any kind of sense of connection that you can, because suddenly the world that everybody thought was connected immutably isn't. And so, I think that to me, that's what makes the play so astonishingly funny, because I'm not saying that you sit there in the audience like you would in an Arthur Miller play and be constantly reminded of what the world outside of these rooms is, but the actors playing the characters would obviously know. And it's like any other time when you're sloppy in life, if you can look back with a certain kind of clarity at your behavior, it's usually because of something that's driven you to that point, and you're acting outside of your normal behavior because of whatever influences are pushing in on you.
And it's set about the same time that Downton Abbey is heading towards, isn't it?
Yeah. I think Downton Abbey last season, wasn't it 1924? I think.
Yeah. So
we're not quite there yet. But a really wonderful example, I think, of would be F. Scott Fitzgerald's novel "Tender as the Night," which is set in Europe and around that time, and he struggled to write it for 10 years. And it's about people who are kind of adrift. And I think, as we all know if you watch Downton Abbey, there was a kind of order to their lives that was very, very reassuring. And, you went one place at one time and another place at another time, and you went to London for the season, and you went, blah, blah, blah. But it is, I just think all of that's gone now. And these are just people who have enough money to not work all the time, and they're just they want to be happy. They want their old lives back. Again, I'm speaking entirely as someone who's adding this layer of psychology to them that I'm not so sure that they're acting on overtly, but it's got to be there underneath. And I really do think that's what has given the play its lasting power, and it's so much, to me, more compelling a play than some of his lesser, the plays that don't make people act quite so outlandishly. Those plays don't appeal to me much, because just as a director, because they feel like a little music box that you wind up and you open the lid and then it plays and everybody knows what it's going to play.
And this one feels like you never know what's going to happen next.
See that? Yeah, there's just this sort of terror of uncertainty of how far will they push this that is great. And of course, working with Jimmy and Deb, who I've worked with many times before, I think this may be our 5th or 6th play together. And frequently when they were Hermione and Leontes, and they were Beatrice and Benedict for me. We've had a great long history of working with volatile pairings, so I think it'll be great fun.
Thank you so much. I'm sure it's going to be the ultimate pairing. Thank you, James.
Thank you so much.
Talkbacks to Go is a production of Orange Tree Imports, Pro Video and Film, and Audio for the Arts. Your host is Oren Schroeder. I'm Buzz Kemper. Our music is by Steve Tibbetts and is used by permission of the artist. Please find us on iTunes and YouTube under APT Talkbacks to Go. Thank you for listening.